Do ba 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 do boo do a boo ba do ba do boo boo ba do a do ba do ba do a do ba do ba do 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 a do ba do.
Are you so excited? Can you come over here? And can you sit right here? Awesome.
What is that? A marshmallow.
So you see this? What's this?
A marshmallow.
It is. You can have it whenever you want, but I'm gonna leave the room for a little bit. If we come back in a couple minutes and you have this still, we'll give you a second one. So then you could get two.
I'll be back in a little bit, okay?
Is this like a surprise?
A little bit.
Just a couple minutes.
Like 3 or 4 or 5?
Like 3 or 4 or 5. All right, how'd we do?
Did you eat it? No. Here you go. Now you can too.
Ricky, you did it.
But that's one.
That's the one? Go for it.
So which kid were you? I'm the little girl eating that sucker. I just do not have the self-discipline. Just ask my family that just had Thanksgiving with me. All of us watched it with certain things firing off in our brains. I mean, most of it was just, this is the most adorable thing that I've ever seen, and we have the cutest kids at Great Lakes, that's for sure. But some of you were watching going, oh, just hold on because it gets better. If you'll just hold on to that marshmallow for a couple minutes, then you'll have 2 marshmallows, and 2 is always better than 1. Double is better than single. Just hold on, it gets better. You remember being a kid. You probably assumed it would get better. If I just hold on, it'll get better. I'll have money and I'll have freedom and I'll have all these things and it'll get better. And you got older and you realized that's not true. You should have ate it while you had it, right? Because when you're a kid, you don't think, hold on, it gets better. You go, it can't possibly get better than this. I have a whole marshmallow in front of me, and they told me if I wanted to, I could eat it. I don't have to wait. They made that sound optional. This is how a lot of life is, right? We have this thing in front of us, and we feel like if we don't eat it now, we're not going to have it later. We certainly won't have more of it because it feels like all the good in life is finite. There's just so much of it to go around. And if someone happens to be kind and gives you a slice of that pie, don't leave it there. They could take it back. It doesn't get better than this right now. Most of us make decisions right now based on just right now. We don't think about the future. We don't think about the past. We don't think about what else is going on in our day. We're just trying to make it through. And if something good comes our way, we are not going to pass it up because you only live once, right? But you go back and forth a little bit because that line between I'm going to be a grown-up and I'm going to think like a kid gets really thin really fast. For some of us, it's the moment we log on to our Amazon account, or we walk into Target, or we go to the movies. All of a sudden, we become a kid again. Here's the spoiler for any students that might be in the room, whether that's middle school, high school, or college. You never actually grow up. You just wear your mom and dad's clothes. That's really all it is. I mean, I'm 44 years old, and on the inside, I still think and feel like a 14-year-old. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. The adults in your life don't actually know what's going on. We do a really good job of pretending like we do, but we don't. There's a marshmallow in front of us, too. And we're just not sure what to do with it. That line gets really thin. As we get older, it becomes a little more consequential than marshmallows, though. The line between legal and illegal. Funny how we can flirt with that, right? We can walk right up to the line, maybe even dip a toe on the other side, but we feel like as long as we're in both worlds, then it's like net zero, right? It just balances out. We're not that bad. It's funny how you get this when you're driving, right? The speed limit, the legal speed limit is a number. But you and I are like, oh, it's not totally illegal to go 15 over. I mean, it's only illegal if the police officer catches you, right? We're always stretching it. We're always pushing it. Tax season, we stretch a few things, right? Because we're just trying to make it work. We're just trying to get through life. The line between legal and illegal is really, really thin sometimes. Same thing with the line between responsible and irresponsible. You will regularly flirt with just acting like a kid again when it comes to responsibility. Think about tomorrow morning when your alarm goes off at some ungodly hour. The responsible thing to do, would be to get up, because you have to be at the job that pays you money at a certain time. And in order to be at that job at a certain time, you have to leave for that job at a certain time. And in order to leave for that job at a certain time and be fully clothed and halfway awake, you have to get out of bed at a certain time before that. So the responsible thing is, do not hit snooze. But you will flirt with that line. One time. 9 minutes. What's 9 minutes? Why is snooze 9 minutes, by the way? It goes off again, you hit it one more time. We'll just snooze again. Pretty soon it's 27 minutes, and you have to get out of the house in 5. And you know you're going to hit traffic. That's how a kid runs to the bus stop. Isn't it funny how in the moment we will sometimes start flirting with that line and stretching it and pushing it? And so it's not just about illegal, legal. It's not just about responsible and irresponsible. It's also about moral and immoral, isn't it? Like, think about some of the things that you have done in your life. We're not going to ask you to share that with anybody. We're not going to ask you to raise your hand. But odds are, all over this room, some of us have made immoral decisions. But we would never have called it that. We would have called it moral, because we always do the moral thing. We stretch the line. It's like we're always wondering, how much can we get away with without getting in trouble? Put a little more intensely, how close to sin can we get without sinning? I remember thinking this way, especially when I was a teenager and I went to church, and the youth pastor would stand up in front of the whole group and tell you what you should and should not do before you're married. And all my friends were like, well, technically this thing isn't that thing. Technically, if we go this far, we haven't gone too far. I remember some of the questions that were asked in small group, and the adults looking at us like, how do you even know that that's a thing? But we want to justify our immorality or our sin and not call it that. We want to stretch it. So it's the same thing with whether something's ethical or unethical. That line gets really razor thin. It gets a little bit cloudy. So again, I've used this example already in this series, but these are those moments at work where you're tempted to cut a corner, and make an unethical move, but you justify it because you've got to get the paycheck, or you have a deadline to meet. And if you don't meet the deadline, you won't have the paycheck. So this isn't totally unethical, because it would be unethical to not feed my children. We flirt with the line, right? We blur the line, just like kids do. My kids did this all the time when they're young. They still do it as teenagers, where I'll call them on something and they'll say, well, you didn't say to not do that thing. This is us excusing our behavior. It's us excusing our thinking. We will always think like kids. So if it's not illegal, it's okay. If it's not immoral, it's passable. If it's not crossing the line, then we're fine. My question for you is, would you set the bar that low for anyone else in your life? If you're a parent, would you set the bar that low for your kid? What about the people you work with? What about your spouse? You wouldn't want them to have that low of a standard of right or wrong. You wouldn't want them to always be flirting with the line. If anything, you would want them to be well back from the line and never even consider stepping close to it. But we think like kids. So the question that I want to introduce you to today, that's the fourth question in this series that we've called Don't Wish You Didn't. And it's a bunch of questions that we think you don't want to wish you hadn't asked yourself before you make big decisions or you navigate your way through a significant chapter of your life. The fourth question is really a question of maturity. Can we start thinking less like a kid and a little more like an adult? Now, I know adult gets, we can get real wishy-washy about what that means, and I'm going to talk more about that. But can we mature in our thinking? I've been pushing myself lately to actually grow up, and I'm going to do a little bit of that today with you. Before I tell you what the question is, I want to tell you what the question isn't. Because if there's a maturity question, there's an immaturity question too. And the immaturity question is the one that so many of us navigate life with. And it's this: is there anything wrong with this? Is there anything wrong with this thing that I want to do, this thing I want to say, this place I want to go, this person I want to be with? Is there anything wrong with this? Now, you got to go back to when we talked about you being the greatest salesperson in the world, especially when you're selling to you. You will regularly glaze over the whole question with, no, there's nothing wrong with this. And you will justify a decision because of what you want. You will give up maybe what you want most for what you want in the moment. This is how kids act. I grew up in a home with a lot of rules. I'm very thankful for how I grew up. My parents might be here watching, so I don't want my parents to think I didn't love my childhood. I had a great one, but there were a lot of rules. And so the way that I thought through everything was, am I going to get punished or am I not going to get punished? Am I going to get grounded or am I not going to get grounded? Am I going to get caught or am I going to get away with it? So the line became good versus bad. And I could easily convince myself that a lot of the bad things were good things. So when I'd ask, is there anything wrong with this? I'd say no. And I'd have a whole lot of argument backed up for when I inevitably got caught doing the thing that I knew better than to do. So the question isn't, is there anything wrong with this choice? The better question is, the mature question is, what's the wise thing to do? Which is different than what's the right thing to do. I want to push you to ask yourself about wisdom. And wisdom we'll define as we go today, but we have to get away from, am I going to get caught? Am I going to get arrested? Am I going to get fired? Am I going to get left? What's the wise thing to do? Because I can promise you this, if you start focusing on that and you start asking yourself this question on a daily basis, maybe even an hourly basis, you will end up in the right lane. You will end up making good choices, and you will have fewer regrets. And the scriptures are full of sentences and paragraphs and entire books, if you look at the book of Proverbs, that is totally dedicated to wise living. And when you think about Christianity, whether you are one or you're here considering the whole idea or reconsidering the whole idea, you might think about good versus bad. Jesus is good, everything else is bad, right? That's kind of how we've simplified it in our minds. It's about doing the right thing and not doing the wrong thing. And so it's, give to the poor and take care of widows and don't say bad words and go to church and read your Bible and that kind of thing. But so much more of the scripture focuses on this idea of wisdom, because wisdom will help us make those right choices. And Paul did this often in all of his letters that he wrote to all of these Christians in these different cities. One of them was Ephesus. He talks specifically about living wisely. Now, we've put chapters and verses into this letter, but if you read it really as a whole, you would see that this idea that Paul gets at, that we're going to look at, starts with, so you are God's masterpiece. You are made in his image. So live wisely. This is how he puts it. Be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you think you're a fool, because no. Most people won't raise their hand because you're not one. Truth is, you're not a fool, but you might make foolish choices. You might do foolish things, of which I am the chief. I do a lot of really dumb things in my life. And Paul says, here's what part of the meaning of following Jesus is. We decide we're no longer going to live foolishly, and we are going to start living wisely. He says, be careful to live. And that is kind of the crux of what it means to be wise. It's to live, I'm going to put it this way, carefully, purposefully, and thoughtfully. Wisdom is not just barreling your way through life. It's not just pushing to the top. It's not just getting over the thing. It's slowing down. Thinking about how things are related, thinking about the order of things, having ideas and goals and moving with purpose through life, and being careful as you go. So in the original Greek, and I don't speak Greek, I just know that in the original Greek, the word that we've translated live is actually a word for walk. So Paul's saying, walk wisely in your life. In other words, walk carefully and thoughtfully and purposefully. The way you move through your everyday and the decisions that you make and the relationships you have matters because it impacts you forever. And whenever I think about this sentence and the idea of walking with wisdom, this is going to sound so stupid, but I think about the way I have to walk around my apartment complex. Because everywhere you go, you're going to see a sign that looks something like this. Now, they had to put this sign up for a reason. Because people don't clean up after their pet. They're trying to get you to do that. Like, have you ever noticed that? The signs don't go up to prevent something. The signs go up to kind of correct something. And so when you are walking around Pembroke in Gurnee, you better walk with some wisdom. If you are going to venture off the path, you better be careful. You better step with purpose. You better think before you do. Because if you don't, you are going to literally step in it. And you will have a stinky, disgusting, really hard to clean up mess when you get back to your place. So if you're going to venture off the path, do it wisely. Think about how most of us live life. We don't want to walk on anybody's path, so we're going to forge our own. And we go barreling our way through it. And we're not walking wisely, we're just running. And then we step in it in life and we go, well, how did that happen? And we want to blame everybody else. We want to get mad at the dog for doing what dogs do. But is it their fault? Not really. It's mine. Because I didn't slow down long enough to think wisely and to move wisely. So Paul goes on to say this. Make the most of every opportunity. Part of wisdom is making the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Now, nobody understood making the most of something better than Paul. Paul lived a crazy life. And if you look at it on paper, you would say, this dude lived an awful life. He had it worse than anybody. I mean, he was in shipwrecks. He had rocks thrown at him. He was beaten. He was put in prison. He was accused of all kinds of crazy things. And Paul would write in one of his other letters, I've learned to be content, whether I have a lot or a little. There were times where he was doing pretty well. People were taking good care of him, and he had a job, and he could put food on the table. And then there were other times where he wasn't sure if he was going to have another meal. And so he learned to make the most of whatever the circumstances are in his life. He learned to be content in those. And on top of it, Paul believed and taught us that Jesus could return. He could come back at any moment. And so Paul would regularly wrestle with, how do I want to be found when he does come back? How do I want things to look when he does return? I want him to find me busy serving him. I want him to find me making the most of my time. I want him to find me living wisely. I only have so much time. There's only so many minutes in an hour. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many days in a week, so many weeks in a year, so many years in a lifetime. So I'm going to use each of them the best I can. In some ways, Paul's saying, redeem the time. Redeem the time. And you remember the end of the sentence, in these evil days. Redeem the time in these evil days. And that sounds really judgy and harsh for him to end it that way. Like, is it really all that bad, right? But the days are evil. And maybe not in the sinister kind of way that we always think, but opposite of wisdom for sure. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you made a trip to Target and someone was standing there going, now make wise choices while you're here? Right? The cashier never once stopped and was like, now do you have enough money in your account to cover all of this? Or there's nobody walking around. They don't walk down the aisle and go, can I help you find something? Oh, you're buying the newest model of this, even though the one you have at home works perfectly fine and does everything you need it to? Let's be wise before we buy this thing. In some ways, that's how the days are evil. Like, we're always being pushed to make rash, fast, quick decisions instead of really thinking through what the best decision would be, so that we're not at home with buyer's remorse and a ton of regret about things that we did without thinking twice. Redeem the time. Redeem the money. Redeem the opportunity. Redeem the relationships. Be wise. Because you could have two. You could have two if you were careful and purposeful and thoughtful. So ask yourself regularly, what's the wise thing to do? Now, if you're anything like me, you hear the idea of wisdom and wise, and it's great that Paul talks about it, but how do I determine what that wise thing is? And like I said, you might find an adult in your life or someone that's more of an adult than you, a little bit older than you, and you can go, I've got this decision going on. What would be the wise thing to do? And they're going to go, I have no idea. What'd you come to me for? I can't even figure out my own life. But odds are they'll start telling you about some of their experience. They might start telling you about some of the ways that they're navigating it right now. And in there is wisdom. So I want to introduce you to three perspectives for wisdom. And these three perspectives are kind of questions that are bolted on to the main question to help you determine the answer. And I believe that if you and I get in the habit of asking ourselves this series of questions every day, all day long, it will change our life. It will change our life because it changes the equation that we're making decisions by. So, perspective number one, our past experiences. So you might do it like this. In light of my past experiences, what is the wise thing to do? I don't always know what to do going forward, but I know what's been getting to this point. So the example I want to give you is this. There are some really intelligent, really savvy, and smart people that will tell you or do themselves that they will go get a credit card that earns them airline miles or points or cash back. And if you do this, by the way, no judgment, you're just smarter than I am and more disciplined than me. And they'll say you should put everything on this credit card and then pay it off at the end of the month because then you get all the benefits. That would be a really bad idea for this guy. Because here's what I'll do. I'll get to the end of the month and I'll go, I can pay it off next month. I'll pay the minimum. I'll pay it off next month. Next thing you know, it's 2029. And I'm still trying to pay off things that I bought in 2024. I do not have the self-discipline to say I'll put it on the card and pay it off at the end of the month. Because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it on the card and then I'm going to spend all the money I have to pay it off at the end of the month. And I'm going to pile it up. And I'm going to be under a mountain of debt. It's just not wise for me. And here's how I know that. Because I've done it. I've tried it. And I never once paid it off at the end of the month. Again, I'm not telling you how to do your life. I'm just telling you, in light of my past experience, the wise thing is not for me to live on a credit card. So look back on your life and go, I've been here in some way before, and here's what I learned. You've gotten up every day, your whole life. That should have taught you something about the snooze button. It should have taught you something about the stress of getting to work on time when you don't get up on time. You've been in relationships before. You've had this argument before. You've had other jobs before. Use them. You have a library of learning walking with you all day, every day. Second perspective, your present circumstances. What's going on right now? Not just this right now, but all of the right now. Right? Your few minutes here at GLC today, this is a small piece of the pie of your full day. You've got a lot of other things going on today. What are the present circumstances? So sticking with my kind of money thing, it's December. Did you know that? Today is December 1. That means there's a big thing at the end of the month that's really expensive. Even if you just buy one gift for everybody in your life, you need some money piled up. You need some money saved up. So for me, given my present circumstances, this is not the best month for me to go buy myself a bunch of stuff. Because I'm going to spend all of my money for the month on me instead of them. And my 4 children are going to have something to say about that on the 25th. Like, I'm looking at my present circumstances. It's an expensive month. So I might not go out to eat as much this month. I might not go buy the brand new vacuum this month. I might wait to upgrade my phone. I'm going to hold off on some things. Not because those things are bad, not because those things are wrong, but given my present circumstances, it's just not wise for me to do it right now. Third perspective, your future hopes and dreams. What do you want to be true in a year or 5 years or 10 years? And I'm not saying you got to come up with a detailed plan. Just what do you want to be true for your life down the road? And what decisions can you make now that aren't going to create roadblocks or are going to pave the way for that thing to be true in the end? For me, I'm taking my kids on vacation in February. I won't tell you where, but you could probably guess. Which has required me to save my entire life to pay for it. Because my future hopes and dreams is that I come home with no debt. That's what I want to be true. I want to come home from that trip and not have charged anything. I want to pay cash for everything. If I want that to be true, then how I lived this month and the last month and the last month and the last month was informed with that hope. I made decisions that I believe to have been wise ones because I was thinking ahead of what I wanted to be true down the road. Now here's the magic. You pile all of those together. In light of my past experiences, my present circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, what's the wise thing to do? Here's what I can promise you. It won't be mysterious. It won't be mysterious. My brother has a Roomba vacuum, and I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And I really want one. Because if I could have a robot clean for me. So I'm standing literally in Target. I went there for the 4th time just yesterday. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, it's not Black Friday anymore, but there's still a Black Friday sale. I mean, I feel like that might be God telling me to do this. That's a really good price. I'm probably never going to see this price again. It's a really busy month, and I need to keep the house kind of clean because people might pop over, right? Like, this would probably be a good idea. You hear what I did? This would be a good idea. But then I asked myself, in light of my past experience, my present circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, so I'm not going to pay off the credit card. I need to pay for Christmas, and I want to go on vacation and not have any debt. The wise thing's not to buy this vacuum anymore. And I kept walking. And I know that's really like a silly example. We're facing far bigger decisions than that. But I can promise you the same will work out, where you'll go, I know what the wise thing to do is. Because you've thought about it from those 3 perspectives. What you might find yourself doing a little less often is excusing yourself for stretching the line. So this is what excusing yourself sounds like. I'm not hurting anyone. I can handle it. There's no law against it, and God will forgive me. Here's the thing. There's a little bit of truth in all of those. God will forgive you. It probably isn't hurting anyone. You probably can handle it, and there's likely no law against it. But that doesn't mean it's wise. And some of our biggest regrets are not because we made bad decisions, but because we made unwise decisions. So stop excusing yourself and start asking yourself, what is the wise thing to do? Ultimately, what you're going to need to get your head around is moving on from thinking like a kid, where the metric for everything is, am I going to get caught or am I going to get away with it? Am I going to get punished or am I going to get away with it? You got to move away from thinking just good versus bad, because you will convince yourself that every decision you make is a good one. And start changing the metric to, is it wise or is it unwise? And choose wisdom so you don't step in it and regret it later. This question is maybe the most important of the 5 questions, because in some ways it leads into all of the others. When you make wise decisions, you make good decisions, and you have fewer regrets. So again, for review, the question is, what's the wise thing to do? We decided to, this week, include you in our little social experiment that we did with the kids. And on your way in, you were given a lifesaver, and you were at least encouraged to not eat it. So for fun, if you manage to hold on to that and not eat it, we're going to give you another one on your way out this morning. Let's pray. God, you are good, and I'm grateful that you are wisdom. And you help us make wise choices when we choose to be like you. So, Lord, while none of us are fools, we will all readily admit that we make foolish choices. And sometimes we make those foolish choices because we've convinced ourselves that it's the good one. Help us to find the wise one so that we can do this not just different, but better. In the days ahead and the weeks ahead, in this Christmas season ahead, will you help us to walk with wisdom, live with wisdom, so that we can have at least a few less regrets. We love you so much. Thanks for loving us. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, on your way out, I wanted to remind you that our Christmas services are coming up really, really soon. On the 22nd and the 23rd, we are asking you to reserve a seat for you and anyone you're going to bring with you. I will tell you, the Sunday is filling up really quick, so if you still want to choose your service, reserve your seat today. It's really easy to do. Have a great Sunday, everybody. We'll see you next time.